The gleaming entrance of the Grand Meridian Hotel had seen wealth pass through its doors for decades. Men in tailored suits, women dripping in diamonds, cars worth more than most homes. But on a humid Tuesday evening in June, something happened beneath those brass chandeliers that would shake the foundations of what money could buy. Marcus Holloway, a self-made real estate tycoon worth over $40 million, stepped out of his black Bentley Continental and tossed the keys at 22-year-old valet attendant Daniel Reed without even looking at him. When Daniel fumbled slightly, his hand still trembling from news he'd received an hour earlier, Marcus didn't just complain. He humiliated him. In front of guests, hotel staff, and security cameras, he spat at the young man's feet and called him worthless, a failure, someone who would never amount to anything. Daniel stood there, head down, swallowing the shame. He needed this job. He couldn't afford to lose it, not now, not with his younger sister's medical bills piling up and his mother working double shifts at the nursing home just to keep their lights on. But 10 minutes after Marcus disappeared into the hotel's marble lobby, a low rumble began to echo through the parking lot. One motorcycle, then two, then a dozen. By the time the sound stopped, 17 bikers had rolled into the Grand Meridian's entrance, their engines cutting off in unison like a symphony of steel and defiance. They weren't there by accident. One of them had been watching. One of them knew Daniel's story. And one of them had made a promise years ago, a promise to a man who'd saved his life, that he would look after his son. What Marcus Holloway thought was just another evening of flexing his wealth became the night he learned that respect isn't purchased. It's earned. And sometimes it's defended by those who ride not for glory, but for honor. If you've ever been treated like you didn't matter, keep watching. This story is for you. The Grand Meridian Hotel sat like a crown jewel on the corner of 5th and Laurel, its glass facade reflecting the amber glow of streetlights as the sun dipped below the city skyline. Valets in crisp burgundy vests moved with practiced efficiency, guiding luxury vehicles into tight rows beneath the porte-cochere. The air smelled of expensive cologne, fresh asphalt, and the faint sweetness of magnolia trees planted along the entrance. Daniel Reed stood at his post near the valet podium, keys jingling in his pocket, his face tight with exhaustion. He'd been on his feet for 9 hours straight, and his shift didn't end for another 2. His phone buzzed in his back pocket, another text from his mother. He didn't need to read it to know what it said. Insurance denied the claim again. We need another $3,000 by Friday. He closed his eyes and exhaled slowly. $3,000. He made $11 an hour plus tips. Even with doubles, even with weekends, it wasn't enough. It was never enough. A sharp honk jolted him back to the moment. A black Bentley Continental, sleek midnight paint job, chrome rims that caught the light like polished mirrors, rolled smoothly to a stop directly in front of him. The engine purred, low and expensive. Daniel straightened his posture, forced a polite smile and stepped forward. The driver's door opened before he could reach for the handle. Out stepped Marcus Holloway, 6 feet tall, silver hair slicked back, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Daniel's car. His watch, a Patek Philippe, glinted as he adjusted his cufflinks. He didn't look at Daniel, didn't acknowledge him. Just tossed the keys in his direction without a word. Daniel reached out, but his hands were still shaking from the stress, from the text, from the weight of everything pressing down on him. The keys slipped through his fingers and clattered onto the pavement. Marcus stopped mid-step, turned, his eyes, cold, grey, unforgiving, locked onto Daniel with the kind of contempt reserved for things beneath notice. "Are you serious?" Marcus said, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "I'm sorry, sir," Daniel said quickly, bending down to pick up the keys. "I've got it." "You've got it?" Marcus interrupted, stepping closer. "You can't even catch a set of keys, and you think you've got it." Daniel stood up, keys in hand, his face flushed. Around them, other guests were watching now. A couple in evening wear paused near the entrance. Another valet glanced over nervously. The doorman shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. "I apologize, Mr. Holloway," Daniel said quietly, recognizing the man from previous visits. "It won't happen again." Marcus took another step forward, close enough that Daniel could smell the bourbon on his breath. "You're right. It won't." He looked Daniel up and down, his lip curling in disgust. "You know what you are? A failure. A nobody. You'll be parking cars for the rest of your pathetic life because you don't have the brains or the spine to do anything else." Daniel's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He couldn't afford to say anything. Marcus leaned in, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "People like you are replaceable, remember that." And then he did it. He spat, not in Daniel's face, but at his feet, the saliva landing on the polished concrete between them like a mark of total disregard. The air went still. The other valet looked away. The doorman stared at the ground. The couple near the entrance pretended they hadn't seen anything. Marcus turned and walked into the hotel without another word, his shoes clicking against marble as he disappeared into the golden glow of the lobby. Daniel stood there frozen, his hands clenched around the keys so tightly they dug into his palm. His chest felt tight, his eyes stung, but he didn't move. He couldn't, not here, not in front of everyone. He walked slowly to the Bentley, got in, and drove it carefully to the parking garage, his vision blurring slightly as he blinked hard to keep himself together. By the time he returned to his post, the couple had gone inside. The other valet gave him a sympathetic look, but said nothing. The doorman acted like nothing had happened. Daniel pulled out his phone and stared at his mother's text again. "We need another 3,000 by Friday." He slipped the phone back into his pocket and took a deep breath. He would figure it out. He always did. He had no choice. But 10 minutes later, a sound began to roll through the streets. Low, distant, growing louder with every second. The unmistakable rumble of motorcycle engines, and they were heading straight for the Grand Meridian. Drop a comment below if you've ever had to stay silent when someone disrespected you. Let's talk about it, because this story is just getting started. Tell us where you're watching from and what time it is right now. The sound started as a faint hum in the distance, like thunder rolling across a summer sky, but it didn't fade. It grew, deeper, louder, more deliberate. Daniel was still standing near the valet podium, trying to shake off the humiliation that clung to him like smoke when the first motorcycle turned the corner onto Fifth Avenue. It was a Harley-Davidson Road King. Black chrome, leather saddlebags, exhaust pipes rumbling with a voice that commanded attention without asking for it. Then came another, and another. Within seconds, a convoy of 17 motorcycles rolled into view, moving in formation like a military unit. They weren't speeding, they weren't revving their engines unnecessarily. They simply arrived, steady, purposeful, impossible to ignore. The other valet, a kid named Jimmy, stopped mid-step and stared. "Holy shit," he muttered under his breath. The doorman straightened his posture, his hand instinctively moving toward the radio clipped to his belt. Guests near the entrance turned to watch, some with curiosity, others with unease. The roar of the engines filled the entire block, echoing off the glass towers and brick facades until it felt like the city itself was holding its breath. One by one, the motorcycles pulled into the hotel's parking lot, lining up in 2 neat rows near the entrance. The engines cut off in unison, and the sudden silence felt louder than the noise had been. Daniel watched, frozen in place, as the riders began to dismount. They weren't the stereotypical bikers you'd see in movies. No leather vests covered in patches, no visible gang colors, no aggression in their movements. These were men and women in their 40s, 50s, even 60s. Some wore plain black jackets, others had denim or canvas, a few had grey in their beards. One woman had silver hair pulled back in a braid, but every single one of them moved with the quiet confidence of people who'd earned their place in the world the hard way. The man who'd been leading the group stepped off his bike last. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a weathered face that looked like it had seen too many miles and not enough sleep. His name was Victor Kane, though most people just called him Kane. He pulled off his gloves slowly, his dark eyes scanning the hotel entrance before landing on Daniel. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Kane's expression didn't change, but something passed between them. A flicker of recognition, maybe, or understanding. Daniel didn't know this man. He was sure of it. But the way Kane was looking at him made his skin prickle with the strange sense that he was being seen, truly seen, for the first time all night. Jimmy leaned over and whispered, "Dude, what the hell is going on? Do you know them?" Daniel shook his head. No, but even as he said it, he wasn't sure it was true. Kane walked forward, his boots heavy on the pavement, his presence filling the space around him like gravity. The other bikers stayed by their motorcycles, silent, watching. A few had their arms crossed. One older man leaned against his bike, his face expressionless. Kane stopped a few feet from Daniel, his gaze steady. "You Daniel Reed?" Daniel's throat went dry. "Yeah." "Who's asking?" Kane didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced toward the hotel entrance, then back at Daniel. His jaw tightened. "Heard what happened out here a few minutes ago." Daniel's stomach dropped. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do," Kane said quietly. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. "Man in a Bentley. Treated you like dirt. Spat at your feet." Daniel's face flushed. He looked down, then back up, his pulse quickening. "Look, I don't want any trouble. I need this job. Whatever you think you're doing—" "We're not here to cause trouble," Kane interrupted. His tone was calm, almost gentle. "We're here to make sure you know you're not alone." Daniel blinked, confused. "I don't understand." Kane took a step closer, lowering his voice. "Your father's name was Thomas Reed, firefighter. Died in the line of duty 11 years ago." The words hit Daniel like a punch to the chest. His breath caught. "How do you know that?" "Because he saved my life," Kane said simply. "August 14th, 2014. Warehouse fire on the east side. I was trapped under a beam. Everyone else had evacuated. Your father came back in, pulled me out. Burned his hands doing it, wouldn't leave until he knew I was safe." Daniel's eyes stung. He remembered that day. He'd been 11 years old. His father had come home with bandages wrapped around both hands, smelling like smoke, refusing to talk about what had happened. 2 months later, he was dead, killed in another fire while saving a family of 4. Kane's voice softened. "I made him a promise that night, told him if he ever needed anything, I'd be there. He laughed it off. Said he didn't need anything except to know his kids would grow up safe." He paused. "But I kept that promise anyway. Been keeping an eye on you from a distance. When I heard what happened tonight, I made some calls." Daniel looked past Kane at the line of motorcycles, at the men and women standing beside them. "Who are they?" "People who believe in honor," Kane said. "People who believe respect isn't something you buy, it's something you earn, and it's something you defend." The doorman was speaking urgently into his radio now. Inside the hotel, security personnel were starting to gather near the glass doors, their faces tense. Kane noticed but didn't seem concerned. He looked back at Daniel. "We're not here to start a fight. We're just here to make sure that man knows he can't treat people the way he treated you and walk away like it doesn't matter." Daniel's voice was barely a whisper. "What are you going to do?" Kane didn't smile, but there was something in his eyes, something steady and unshakable. "We're going to have a conversation, that's all. Just a conversation." He turned and walked back toward the group. The other bikers straightened, their attention shifting to him like soldiers awaiting orders. And as the hotel's automatic doors slid open and 2 security guards stepped outside, Kane raised one hand, calm, deliberate, a signal that said not yet. The message was clear. They weren't leaving. Not until they'd said what they came to say. The 2 security guards who emerged from the Grand Meridian were young, maybe mid-20s, their uniforms crisp and their expressions caught somewhere between authority and uncertainty. The taller one, a black man with a shaved head and a name tag that read Morris, stopped just outside the sliding doors, his hand resting on the radio at his hip. His partner, A shorter white guy with nervous eyes stayed a step behind. "Gentlemen," Morris said, his voice steady but cautious, "I'm going to need you to move your vehicles. This is private property." Kane didn't move. Neither did any of the bikers behind him. They stood in a loose semicircle, silent, their faces unreadable. The only sound was the faint hiss of the hotel's ventilation system and the distant hum of city traffic. "We're not blocking anything," Kane said evenly. "We're just parked. Last I checked, that's not a crime." Morris shifted his weight. "Sir, we've had a complaint. I need you to leave, or I'll have to call the police." "Go ahead," Kane said. He didn't say it aggressively. He said it like someone stating a fact. "We'll wait." The shorter guard whispered something to Morris, who nodded but kept his eyes on Kane. Behind them, more hotel staff had gathered in the lobby. The concierge, a manager in a grey suit, a few guests peering through the glass like spectators at a zoo exhibit. Daniel stood near the valet podium, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. Jimmy had backed away slowly, disappearing toward the parking garage. The doorman was now inside the lobby, speaking urgently to the manager. Kane turned slightly, his gaze finding Daniel again. "You okay?" Daniel nodded, even though he wasn't sure. "Yeah, good." Kane looked back at Morris. "We're not here to cause trouble. We just want to talk to someone. Marcus Holloway, he's a guest here." Morris's jaw tightened. "I can't give out information about our guests." "We're not asking for his room number," Kane said. "We're asking you to let him know we'd like to speak with him, out here, face to face." "And if he doesn't want to?" Kane's expression didn't change. "Then we'll wait until he does." The manager, a thin man in his 50s with wire-rimmed glasses and a nervous energy, stepped outside, flanked by Morris and his partner. "I'm Edward Sinclair, the general manager," he said, his voice clipped and professional. "I don't know what this is about, but you're disrupting our guests, and I will not tolerate—" "Your guest disrupted one of your employees," Kane interrupted, his voice still calm but harder now. "He humiliated him, degraded him, spat at him like he was nothing, and you did nothing about it." Sinclair blinked, thrown off. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do," Kane said. "Your doorman saw it, your other valet saw it, and I guarantee your security cameras caught it, so don't stand there and pretend you don't know." Sinclair's face flushed. "That's a matter between the hotel and our staff. It's none of your concern." "It became my concern the moment that man decided respect was optional." One of the bikers, a woman in her late 50s with silver hair and a leather jacket, stepped forward. Her voice was quiet but firm. "We're not asking for much. We're just asking for accountability. If someone treated your son that way, wouldn't you want someone to stand up for him?" Sinclair opened his mouth, then closed it. For a moment he looked like he didn't know what to say. Morris stepped forward again. "Look, I get it, but this isn't the way to handle it. You're making a scene." "Good," Kane said. "Maybe someone needs to make a scene. Maybe that's the only way people like Marcus Holloway learn that their money doesn't make them untouchable." Inside the lobby, a figure appeared near the elevators. Tall, silver hair, charcoal suit. Marcus Holloway. He stopped near the concierge desk, arms crossed, staring out at the parking lot with an expression of cold irritation. Kane saw him. So did Daniel. "There he is," Kane said quietly. He raised his voice just enough to carry. "Mr. Holloway, we'd like a word." Marcus didn't move. He said something to the concierge, who immediately picked up a phone. Sinclair held up his hands. "That's it. I'm calling the police." "Go ahead," Kane said again. "We'll be here." And as Sinclair pulled out his phone and began dialing, the bikers remained exactly where they were, 17 men and women who had decided that tonight, in this moment, dignity mattered more than convenience. The city hummed around them, the hotel gleamed, and Daniel Reed stood at the edge of the parking lot, watching as strangers defended him in a way no one ever had before. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. We love hearing from you, no matter where in the world you are. The police arrived within 10 minutes. Two patrol cars rolled up to the Grand Meridian's entrance, their lights flashing but their sirens silent. 4 officers stepped out, 2 men, 2 women, all moving with the practiced caution of people who didn't yet know what kind of situation they were walking into. The lead officer was a woman in her early 40s, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, her nameplate reading Sergeant Alvarez. She surveyed the scene quickly. 17 motorcycles parked in neat rows, 17 bikers standing calmly beside them, hotel security lingering near the entrance, and a valet attendant watching from the sidelines like he'd stumbled into something far bigger than himself. Alvarez walked forward, her hand resting casually on her belt, her expression neutral. "Evening, folks. We got a call about a disturbance. Anyone want to tell me what's going on?" Edward Sinclair stepped forward immediately, his voice tight with frustration. "These people are trespassing. They're refusing to leave. I've asked them multiple times." "We're parked legally," Kane interrupted, his tone calm. "We haven't blocked any exits. We haven't threatened anyone. We're just here to speak with one of your guests." Alvarez looked at Kane, then at Sinclair. "And who would that be?" "Marcus Holloway," Kane said. "He's inside, probably watching from the lobby right now." Alvarez's eyes flicked toward the glass doors. Sure enough, Marcus was still standing near the concierge desk, arms crossed, his expression cold and unreadable. He met her gaze briefly, then looked away. "And what exactly do you want to talk to him about?" Alvarez asked. Kane nodded toward Daniel. "He assaulted this young man." Sinclair's eyes went wide. "That's not true. Not physically," Kane clarified. "But he humiliated him, degraded him, spat at his feet, in public, in front of witnesses." Alvarez turned to Daniel. "Is that true?" Daniel hesitated. Every instinct told him to stay quiet, to not make waves, to protect the job he couldn't afford to lose. But then he looked at Kane, at the bikers standing silently behind him, at the way they'd shown up for him without him even asking. "Yeah," Daniel said quietly. "It's true." Alvarez studied him for a moment, then looked at Sinclair. "You have security footage." Sinclair shifted uncomfortably. "We do, but I'd like to see it." "That's private property, and this is a potential assault case," Alvarez said, her voice hardening slightly. "I can get a warrant if you'd prefer, but that's going to take time and create a lot more paperwork for everyone. Or you can show me the footage now and we can handle this quickly." Sinclair's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Fine. Follow me." Alvarez gestured to one of her officers, a younger man with a buzz cut, to follow her inside. She paused and looked back at Kane. "You stay here. Don't move. Understood?" Kane nodded. "We're not going anywhere." As Alvarez and Sinclair disappeared into the lobby, the remaining officers stayed outside, keeping a cautious distance from the bikers. One of them, a woman with short red hair, walked over to Daniel. "You okay?" she asked. Daniel nodded, though he wasn't sure. "Yeah, that must have been rough. It was just, I need this job. I can't afford to lose it." The officer's expression softened. "You shouldn't have to choose between your dignity and your paycheck." Daniel didn't know what to say to that. Inside the hotel, Alvarez and Sinclair stood in the security office, a cramped room filled with monitors showing live feeds from cameras positioned throughout the property. The buzz-cut officer stood beside her, arms crossed, as Sinclair instructed the security guard on duty to pull up the footage from the valet entrance. The video played in silence. Marcus stepping out of his Bentley, tossing the keys, Daniel fumbling them, Marcus stepping forward, his face twisted with contempt. The words couldn't be heard, but his body language was clear, aggressive, demeaning, deliberate. And then the spit, subtle but unmistakable. Alvarez watched the entire exchange without expression. When it ended, she turned to Sinclair. "You saw this happen, didn't you?" Sinclair looked uncomfortable. "I didn't see it personally." Your staff did. Your doorman, your other valet, and you have it on camera. So why didn't you do anything about it?" "Mr. Holloway is a valued guest. So's the kid getting humiliated on your property," Alvarez said sharply. You think that's good for business? You think people want to work for a place that lets customers treat them like garbage? Sinclair said nothing. Alvarez nodded to the buzz-cut officer. Get Mr. Holloway down here. Now. 5 minutes later, Marcus Holloway entered the security office, his expression a mixture of annoyance and barely concealed arrogance. This is ridiculous, he said immediately. I didn't do anything wrong. Alvarez didn't waste time. She gestured to the monitor. We have you on camera. Marcus glanced at the screen, then shrugged. So? I dropped my keys. The kid screwed up. I told him so. That's not a crime. You spat at him. I spat on the ground, not at him. Alvarez's eyes narrowed. You humiliated him in public. That's harassment. Marcus smirked. Good luck proving that in court. I've got lawyers who'd bury you in paperwork before you even filed a report. Alvarez didn't respond. She just stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then she turned to Sinclair. I'm going back outside. You two can figure out what you want to do, but those bikers aren't leaving until this gets resolved. And with that, she walked out, leaving Marcus standing in the security office with the sinking realization that for the first time in a very long time, his money might not be enough to make this go away. Sergeant Alvarez stepped back outside into the cool night air, the automatic doors hissing shut behind her. The scene hadn't changed much. The bikers still stood by their motorcycles, patient and immovable as stone. Kane met her eyes as she approached, his expression calm but expectant. We saw the footage, Alvarez said. It's exactly what you described. Daniel, who'd been standing off to the side, felt his chest tighten. Part of him had wondered if maybe he'd overreacted, if maybe it hadn't been as bad as it felt. But hearing Alvarez confirm it made the humiliation real all over again. Kane nodded slowly. So, what now? That depends, Alvarez said. Technically, what Mr. Holloway did could be considered harassment, but it's not assault. And unless your friend here wants to file a formal complaint, there's not much I can do legally. All eyes turned to Daniel. He felt the weight of their attention like a physical thing pressing down on him. His mouth went dry. He hesitated. I just want to forget it happened. I can't afford to lose this job. If I make a complaint, they'll probably fire me the second you leave. Sinclair, who'd followed Alvarez outside, shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Kane stepped forward. You won't lose your job. I'll make sure of it. You can't promise that, Daniel said quietly. Yes, I can, Kane said, his voice firm. Because if they fire you for standing up for yourself, then they'll have 17 witnesses and a lot of very angry people making sure everyone in this city knows exactly what kind of establishment the Grand Meridian really is. Sinclair's face went pale. That's extortion. No, Kane said, that's accountability. Alvarez held up a hand. Let's keep this civil. Mr. Reed, it's your call. But I will say this. If you don't stand up for yourself now, men like Marcus Holloway will keep doing this to other people, because they've learned they can get away with it. Daniel looked down at his hands, still trembling slightly. He thought about his sister in the hospital, his mother working herself into exhaustion, the bills piling up, the constant weight of trying to hold everything together with nothing but sheer will and too little money. And then he thought about his father, Thomas Reed, the firefighter who'd run into burning buildings without hesitation, who'd saved Kane's life, who'd taught Daniel that doing the right thing mattered, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. Daniel looked up, his jaw set. I want to talk to him, face to face. Alvarez raised an eyebrow. You sure? Yeah, Daniel said, his voice stronger now. I'm sure. Kane's expression didn't change, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of approval maybe, or respect. Alvarez turned to Sinclair. Get Holloway out here. Absolutely not, Sinclair said immediately. This is not a request, Alvarez interrupted. He can come out here voluntarily, or I can make this an official investigation and bring him down to the station for questioning. His choice. Sinclair looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Alvarez's tone told him it wouldn't go well. He pulled out his phone and made a call, speaking in low, urgent tones. 5 minutes later, The hotel's sliding doors opened, and Marcus Holloway stepped outside. He moved slowly, deliberately, his expensive shoes clicking against the pavement. His expression was one of barely concealed irritation, like a man being forced to deal with something far beneath his attention. He stopped a few feet from Daniel, his arms crossed. "This is what all the fuss is about? You brought the police and a motorcycle gang because I told you the truth." Daniel's hands clenched into fists at his sides, but he forced himself to stay calm. "The truth? That you're a failure," Marcus said flatly. "That you'll spend the rest of your life in dead-end jobs because you don't have what it takes to be anything more." The words hung in the air like poison. Several of the bikers shifted, their expressions hardening. Kane didn't move, but his jaw tightened. Daniel took a slow breath. "You don't know anything about me." "I know enough," Marcus said. "I know you're parking cars at 22 years old. I know you fumbled my keys like an amateur. I know." "You know nothing," Daniel said, his voice rising. "You don't know that I'm working 2 jobs to pay for my sister's cancer treatment. You don't know that my mom is killing herself trying to keep us afloat after my dad died saving people like you. You don't know that I'm 1 semester away from finishing my engineering degree because I had to drop out to keep my family from losing everything." Marcus blinked, thrown off for the first time. Daniel stepped forward, his voice shaking with anger. "You think money makes you better than me? You think because you can afford a Bentley and a suite in this hotel that you have the right to treat people like garbage? My father was worth 10 of you. He died pulling strangers out of a burning building. What have you ever done that mattered?" Marcus's face flushed. "I built a company from nothing. I employ hundreds of people." "And you treat them the way you treated me," Daniel said, "like they're disposable, like they don't matter." For a long moment no one spoke. The city hummed around them, indifferent to the confrontation unfolding beneath the hotel's golden lights. Kane stepped forward, his voice low but clear. "Your father was Thomas Reed, the firefighter." Marcus's expression flickered, just for a second, with something that might have been recognition. "He saved my life," Kane continued. "August 2014, warehouse fire. He didn't have to come back for me, but he did. And 2 months later, he died doing the same thing for someone else." Kane paused. "So, yeah, I made a promise to look after his son, and I keep my promises." Marcus stared at Daniel, then at Kane, then back at Daniel. The arrogance in his expression had cracked, just slightly, replaced by something harder to read. He stopped, swallowed. "I didn't know. You didn't care to know," Daniel said quietly. And that, more than anything else, was the truth. Marcus Holloway stood in the middle of the Grand Meridian's parking lot, surrounded by 17 bikers, 4 police officers, hotel staff, and a young valet who'd just laid bare the truth of his life with a rawness that cut through every defense Marcus had spent decades building. For the first time in years, Marcus Holloway didn't know what to say. He prided himself on control, on being able to navigate any room, any negotiation, any conflict with the cold precision of someone who'd learned that power and money could solve almost anything. But this wasn't a boardroom. This wasn't a contract dispute. And the people staring at him weren't investors or competitors. They were people who believed in something he'd stopped believing in a long time ago. Honor, respect, decency. Sergeant Alvarez broke the silence. "Mr. Holloway, do you have anything you'd like to say?" Marcus looked at her, then at Daniel. The young man's face was flushed, his hands still clenched at his sides, but there was something in his eyes now. Not anger exactly, but a kind of exhausted defiance. The look of someone who'd been pushed to the edge and decided that falling wasn't the worst thing that could happen. Marcus cleared his throat. He stopped, started again. "I didn't know about your father, or your sister, or any of it." "You didn't ask," Daniel said simply. Marcus flinched. It was a small movement, barely noticeable, but Kane saw it. So did Alvarez. So did the silver-haired woman biker standing near the back, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "You're right," Marcus said quietly. I didn't. I assumed. You assumed I was nothing, Daniel said, because that's easier than seeing people as people. Marcus's jaw tightened. He wanted to argue, to defend himself, to explain that he'd worked his way up from nothing too, that he'd built his empire through grit and determination and sacrifice. But the words felt hollow, because the truth was, somewhere along the way, he'd stopped seeing the people around him. They'd become functions, tools, obstacles or assets depending on the situation. He'd become the kind of man he used to despise. Kane stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. You've got a choice right now, Mr. Holloway. You can walk back into that hotel, pretend this never happened, and keep living the way you've been living. Or you can own what you did, apologize, and maybe learn something. And if I don't, Marcus said, though there was less edge in his voice now, then we make sure everyone knows what kind of man you are, Kane said. Not through violence, not through threats, but through truth. We'll make sure every news outlet, every social media platform, every person who does business with you knows that Marcus Holloway is the kind of man who spits at the feet of a kid working 2 jobs to save his sister's life. Marcus's face went pale. That's fair, Kane interrupted. That's fair, because you did it in public. You humiliated him in front of witnesses. So if you're not willing to own it, then the world gets to know. The silence that followed was suffocating. Marcus looked around, at the bikers, at the police, at the hotel staff watching from the lobby, and then he looked at Daniel, really looked at him, and saw not a faceless valet, but a young man carrying a weight Marcus couldn't imagine. He took a slow breath. I'm sorry. Daniel blinked, surprised. Marcus said it again, louder this time. I'm sorry. What I did was wrong, inexcusable. I treated you like you didn't matter, and that was cruel. He paused, his voice breaking slightly. I've spent so long trying to prove I'm better than everyone else that I forgot what it's like to be human. Daniel didn't respond immediately. He just stared at Marcus, searching his face for sincerity. I can't undo what I did, Marcus continued, but I can try to make it right. What do you need? The medical bills, tuition? I'll cover it, all of it. Daniel's eyes widened. I don't want your charity. It's not charity, Marcus said. It's accountability. It's me trying to be less of an asshole. He almost smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Consider it restitution. Kane glanced at Daniel. It's your call, kid. Daniel hesitated. Part of him wanted to refuse, to tell Marcus to take his money and shove it. But then he thought about his sister, about his mother, about the impossible math of trying to survive on $11 an hour. Okay, Daniel said quietly, but I'm paying you back. Every cent. Once I finish my degree and get a real job. Marcus nodded. Deal. Alvarez stepped forward. Mr. Reed, are you satisfied with this resolution? Daniel looked at Kane, then at the other bikers, then back at Marcus. Yeah, I am. Alvarez nodded. Then we're done here. She looked at Kane. You and your people can go. Kane didn't move immediately. He held Marcus's gaze for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded once, a gesture that said, I'll be watching, and turned to the other bikers. Let's ride. One by one, the motorcycles roared back to life, their engines filling the night with sound. They rolled out of the parking lot in formation, disappearing into the city streets like ghosts, leaving behind only the faint smell of exhaust and the memory of something that had almost gone very, very wrong. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and let us know in the comments. We put our hearts into every chapter, and your support keeps us going. The parking lot felt strangely empty after the bikers left. The rumble of their engines faded into the distance, replaced by the ambient hum of the city, car horns, distant sirens, the rustle of wind through the magnolia trees lining the Grand Meridian's entrance. Daniel stood near the valet podium, his mind still racing. Everything that had just happened felt surreal, like a scene from a movie he'd accidentally walked into. Marcus Holloway, arrogant, untouchable Marcus Holloway, had apologized, and not just apologized, but offered to pay for his sister's treatment. For his tuition, it was too much, too fast, and yet somehow it felt like the first breath of air Daniel had taken in months. Sergeant Alvarez approached him, her expression softer now. "You did good, kid. That took guts." Daniel nodded, still processing. I didn't expect him to. Most people don't," Alvarez said. "But sometimes, when you force someone to face what they've done, they surprise you." She paused. "Not always, but sometimes." She handed him a business card. "If anything changes, if he backs out, if your employer retaliates, anything, call me. I'll make sure it gets handled." Daniel took the card, his hands still trembling slightly. "Thank you." Alvarez nodded and turned to leave, gesturing for the other officers to follow. As they climbed into their patrol cars and drove off, Edward Sinclair, the hotel manager, stepped outside. His face was tight, unreadable. "Mr. Reed," Sinclair said stiffly, "may I speak with you for a moment?" Daniel's stomach dropped. Here it comes. The firing, the retaliation, the inevitable consequence of standing up for himself. But Sinclair surprised him. "I owe you an apology as well. What happened tonight should never have occurred on our property, and the fact that our staff witnessed it and did nothing, that's unacceptable." Daniel blinked. Okay. "I've reviewed the footage," Sinclair continued, "and I've spoken with our owner. Effective immediately, we're implementing new policies regarding guest conduct. No one, and I mean no one, will be allowed to treat our employees the way Mr. Holloway treated you. If it happens again, they'll be asked to leave. Permanently." Daniel didn't know what to say. "Thank you." Sinclair nodded. "You're also receiving a raise, effective immediately, $15 an hour, and if you need time off to finish your degree, we'll work with your schedule." Daniel's eyes widened. "Are you serious?" "Completely," Sinclair said. "We're lucky to have you, and we should have shown that a long time ago." He turned and walked back into the hotel, leaving Daniel standing there, stunned. Jimmy, the other valet, emerged from the parking garage, his eyes wide. "Dude, what the hell just happened?" Daniel let out a shaky laugh. "I have no idea." Inside the hotel, Marcus Holloway sat alone in the lobby bar, nursing a glass of bourbon. The confrontation outside had shaken him in a way he hadn't anticipated. He'd built his fortune on the belief that strength meant never backing down, never admitting weakness, never letting anyone see you sweat. But tonight, he'd done all three. And strangely, he didn't feel weaker for it. He felt lighter, like he'd been carrying something heavy for so long that he'd forgotten what it felt like to set it down. A voice interrupted his thoughts. "Rough night?" Marcus looked up to see the bartender, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a ponytail. Her name tag read Linda. "You could say that," Marcus said. "I saw what happened outside," Linda said, wiping down the bar. "Took guts to apologize like that." Marcus snorted. "Took humiliation, more like." "Maybe," Linda said, "but humiliation's not the worst thing. Pride is." Marcus looked at her, surprised by the bluntness. "You always this philosophical." "Only when the customers deserve it," Linda said with a small smile. She poured herself a glass of water and leaned against the bar. "My husband was a firefighter. Died in the line of duty about 15 years ago." Marcus's chest tightened. "I'm sorry." Me too," Linda said, "but he taught me something before he died. He said the measure of a person isn't how much they have or how high they climb. It's what they do when no one's watching, and what they do when everyone is." She paused. "Tonight, everyone was watching, and you did the right thing." Marcus stared into his bourbon, the amber liquid reflecting the dim light of the bar. "I don't know if it was enough." "It's a start," Linda said. "That's all any of us can do. Start." She moved down the bar to serve another guest, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts. Outside, Daniel pulled out his phone and called his mother. She answered on the second ring, her voice tired but warm. "Hey, honey. How's work? Mom, Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. Something happened tonight. Are you okay? Yeah, Daniel said, a smile breaking across his face for the first time in hours. Yeah, I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. I need to tell you something. And as he stood beneath the Grand Meridian's glowing entrance, surrounded by the ghosts of motorcycles and promises kept, Daniel Reed told his mother that for the first time in a long time, things were going to be all right. 3 days later, Daniel Reed walked into the oncology wing of St. Catherine's Medical Center, carrying a folder of paperwork and a cautious hope he hadn't allowed himself to feel in months. His mother, Eleanor, walked beside him, her hand gripping his arm like an anchor. She hadn't stopped crying since he'd told her the news. Marcus Holloway had wired the full amount for his sister's treatment, along with an additional sum to cover Daniel's remaining tuition. The hospital's fluorescent lights hummed overhead as they made their way to the billing office. A receptionist with kind eyes and oversized glasses looked up from her computer. "How can I help you?" "I'm here to settle an account," Daniel said, placing the folder on the counter. "For Sophia Reed." The receptionist typed quickly, her expression shifting from routine efficiency to surprise. "Oh, Mr. Reed. Yes, we received the payment yesterday. The account is settled in full." Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth. She'd known it was coming, but hearing it confirmed made it real in a way that hit her all over again. "And Dr. Patel wanted me to let you know that Sophia's been cleared to start the new treatment protocol next week," the receptionist continued. "She's responding well to the preliminary therapies. The prognosis is good." Daniel felt his knees weaken. "Thank you. Thank you so much." As they left the billing office and made their way to Sophia's room, Eleanor stopped in the hallway and turned to face her son. Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling, the first real smile Daniel had seen from her in months. "Your father would be so proud of you," she whispered. Daniel pulled her into a hug, his own eyes stinging. "I wish he was here." "He is," Elena said softly. "He's always been here." Across town, in a sleek, high-rise office overlooking the city skyline, Marcus Holloway sat at his desk, staring at his computer screen. He'd been doing that a lot lately, staring without really seeing, his mind replaying the events of that night outside the Grand Meridian. His assistant, Claudia, knocked lightly on the doorframe. "Mr. Holloway, you have a call on line 2. It's Victor Kane." Marcus's eyebrows shot up. "Kane?" "That's what he said." Marcus hesitated, then picked up the phone. "This is Holloway." "It's Kane," came the gruff voice on the other end. "Wanted to check in, make sure you followed through." "I did," Marcus said. "Payment was processed 3 days ago. Medical bills, tuition, and a little extra to help with living expenses." "Good," Kane said. There was a pause. "I also wanted to say something. What you did that night, apologizing, making it right, that took character. Not a lot of people in your position would have done that." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "I didn't have much choice." "You always have a choice," Kane said. "You just made the right one." Another pause. "Look," Kane continued, "I know we didn't exactly meet under ideal circumstances, but if you ever need anything, a reminder, a conversation, whatever, you've got my number now." Marcus smiled faintly. "A reminder." "To stay human," Kane said simply. "It's easy to forget when you spend too much time at the top." "Yeah," Marcus said quietly. "It is." After they hung up, Marcus sat in silence for a long time. Then he opened his email and began drafting a message to his HR director. Subject: New company-wide policy on respect and conduct. Effective immediately, all employees, from entry-level to executive, are required to complete sensitivity training focused on respect, dignity, and ethical treatment of others. Additionally, I want to establish a whistleblower hotline where employees can report misconduct without fear of retaliation. He paused, then added one more line. This starts with me. At the Grand Meridian Hotel, Edward Sinclair gathered his staff in the conference room for an emergency meeting. Valets, bellhops, housekeeping, front desk clerks, everyone crowded into the space, murmuring nervously. Sinclair stood at the front, his expression serious but not unkind. "I want to address what happened a few nights ago. Many of you witnessed an incident involving one of our guests and one of our employees. It was unacceptable, and the fact that it took a group of strangers to hold us accountable is something I deeply regret." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Effective immediately, this hotel is implementing a zero-tolerance policy for disrespectful behavior, from guests and from staff. If you witness misconduct, you report it. If you experience it, you report it. And if you're the one committing it, you'll be held accountable. No exceptions." He looked directly at Daniel, who was standing near the back with Jimmy. "Daniel, I want to thank you for your courage. You reminded all of us why we're here. Not to serve the wealthy, not to kiss up to people with money, but to treat everyone, guests and colleagues alike, with dignity." The room erupted in applause. Daniel's face flushed, but he nodded, grateful. That evening, Kane sat in his garage, hands black with grease, as he tinkered with his motorcycle. The radio played softly in the background, some old blues track that reminded him of simpler times. His phone buzzed. A text from Daniel Reed. "Just wanted to say thank you for everything. My sister starts treatment next week. I'm going back to school in the fall. None of this would have happened without you." Kane stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Your father saved my life. I owed him. But more than that, you deserved better. Keep going. Make him proud." He set the phone down and went back to work, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. The ripple had begun, and it would spread farther than any of them could imagine. 6 months later, the air was crisp with the first hint of autumn. Leaves drifted lazily across the campus of Monroe Technical University, painting the walkways in shades of amber and rust. Daniel Reed stood outside the engineering building, a backpack slung over one shoulder, a coffee in his hand, and a tentative smile on his face. He was back. After 2 years away, after endless shifts at the Grand Meridian, after sleepless nights worrying about bills and his sister and his mother and the impossible weight of holding a family together with duct tape and hope, he was finally back. His phone buzzed. A text from Sophia. "First day back. How does it feel?" Daniel smiled and typed back, "Like I can breathe again." Sophia's treatment had been successful. The cancer was in remission. She was back in school, back to being a normal 16-year-old who complained about homework and spent too much time on her phone. Watching her laugh again, seeing color return to her face, hearing her tease him the way she used to, it was everything. His mother had finally been able to cut back to one job. She was sleeping more, smiling more. The house felt lighter, like a shadow had been lifted, and Daniel was here. Back in school, back on track, back to the future his father had always believed he could have. At the Grand Meridian Hotel, the valet team had grown. Edward Sinclair had hired 3 new attendants and implemented the changes he'd promised. Better pay, better hours, better treatment. The staff moved with a new confidence, knowing they were valued, knowing they had a voice. Jimmy had been promoted to head valet. He stood near the podium, clipboard in hand, directing the evening shift with an easy authority. When a guest snapped at one of the newer attendants for taking too long with their Mercedes, Jimmy stepped in immediately. "Sir, I understand you're in a hurry, but we ask that all guests treat our staff with respect. If that's a problem, we can arrange for you to self-park." The guest blinked, startled, then mumbled an apology. Jimmy smiled. "Thank you. We'll have your car up front in 3 minutes." As the guest walked away, the young attendant, a 19-year-old kid named Carlos, looked at Jimmy with wide eyes. "You really just did that?" "Damn right I did," Jimmy said. "We don't take that shit anymore. Not here." Carlos grinned. Daniel would be proud. "Yeah," Jimmy said, looking out toward the street where Daniel used to stand every night. "Yeah, he would." In a downtown office building, Marcus Holloway sat across from his company's new director of human resources. a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Dr. Yolanda Chen. She'd been with the firm for 3 months, and in that time she'd overhauled nearly every policy related to employee conduct, workplace culture, and ethical standards. "I finished reviewing the anonymous feedback from the sensitivity training sessions," Dr. Chen said, sliding a report across the desk. "Overall, the response has been positive. Employees feel heard. They appreciate the changes." Marcus scanned the document, his expression thoughtful. "Any complaints?" "A few," Dr. Chen admitted. "Mostly from upper management. They feel like the new policies are too soft or unnecessary. But that's expected. Change is uncomfortable, especially for people who've benefited from the old way of doing things." Marcus nodded slowly. "What do you recommend?" "Stay the course," Dr. Chen said firmly. "Culture shift takes time, but if you're serious about this, and I believe you are, then you don't back down when it gets hard. You double down." Marcus looked at her for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "You're right. We stay the course." As Dr. Chen left his office, Marcus turned to the window, gazing out at the city below. He thought about that night outside the Grand Meridian, about Daniel Reed, about Victor Kane, about the moment he'd been forced to confront the man he'd become. He'd spent months trying to make amends, not just with Daniel, but with himself. He'd started volunteering at a local youth center, mentoring kids from backgrounds similar to his own. He'd begun attending therapy, working through the anger and arrogance that had consumed him for years. He'd even reached out to old colleagues and employees he'd wronged, offering apologies and, where possible, restitution. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough to undo decades of cruelty and indifference. But it was something, and every day he tried to be a little better than he'd been the day before. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Kane. Thought you'd want to know? Daniel's back in school, doing well. His sister's in remission. You kept your word. Respect." Marcus stared at the message, something warm and unfamiliar stirring in his chest. He typed back, "Thank you for holding me accountable. I needed it." A moment later, Kane replied, "We all do. Stay sharp." Marcus smiled and set the phone down. At St. Catherine's Medical Center, Sophia Reed sat in the oncology waiting room, her legs swinging beneath the chair as she scrolled through her phone. Her hair, lost during chemotherapy, was growing back in soft, dark waves. She wore a hoodie from Daniel's university and a pair of bright purple sneakers. Eleanor sat beside her, knitting quietly, her face peaceful in a way it hadn't been in years. A nurse appeared in the doorway. "Sophia Reed!" Sophia hopped up, her mother following close behind. They walked down the familiar hallway to Dr. Patel's office, where the oncologist greeted them with a warm smile. "6-month scans are back," Dr. Patel said, pulling up images on her computer. "And I'm happy to report, still clear, no signs of recurrence." Sophia let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "We'll keep monitoring, of course," Dr. Patel continued. "But based on what I'm seeing, you're on an excellent trajectory, Sophia. You should be very proud." "I am," Sophia said quietly. Then, after a pause, "My brother saved my life." Dr. Patel smiled. "He loves you very much. But you saved your own life too. You fought, and you won." As they left the hospital, Sophia pulled out her phone and texted Daniel. "All clear. 6 months, cancer-free. Love you, nerd." A moment later, he replied, "Love you too, brat. Celebrate tonight?" Sophia grinned. "Pizza and terrible movies, obviously." That evening, Victor Kane stood in his garage, the scent of motor oil and leather filling the air. His phone rang. He glanced at the screen. Daniel Reed. "Hey, kid," Kane said, answering. "What's up?" "Just wanted to check in," Daniel said. "Make sure you're doing okay." Kane smiled. "I'm good. You?" "Really good, actually. Classes are going well. Sophia's cancer-free. Mom's happy. It's been a good 6 months." "I'm glad," Kane said. "Your old man would be proud." There was a pause on the other end. "I think about him a lot, about what he'd say if he could see all this." He'd say you did exactly what he taught you, Cain said. You stood up, you didn't back down, and you took care of your family. That's all a man can do. I couldn't have done it without you, Daniel said. Without all of you. That night, it changed everything. You changed everything, Cain corrected. We just showed up. You're the one who had the guts to stand there and face him. Another pause. Thank you, Cain, for keeping your promise, for looking out for me, for everything. Cain's throat tightened. Your father saved my life, kid. Looking out for you isn't a burden. It's an honor. They talked for a few more minutes, about school, about Sophia, about the bike Cain was restoring. And when they finally hung up, Cain stood in the quiet of his garage, surrounded by tools and memories, and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. A week later, on a cool Saturday morning, 17 motorcycles rolled into the parking lot of Monroe Technical University. Students stopped and stared as the convoy came to a halt near the engineering building, engines cutting off in perfect unison. Daniel was walking out of class when he heard the sound. His heart skipped. He jogged toward the parking lot, and there they were, Cain, the silver-haired woman, the older man who'd leaned against his bike that night, and 14 others, all standing beside their motorcycles like silent sentinels. Cain stepped forward, a leather jacket slung over one arm. Heard you were back in school. Thought we'd stop by. Make sure you're settling in okay. Daniel laughed, shaking his head in disbelief. You rode all the way out here just to check on me. We were in the neighborhood, Cain said with a faint smile. Figured we'd say hi. The silver-haired woman stepped forward and handed Daniel a helmet. This belonged to your father. Cain's been holding on to it. Thought you should have it. Daniel took the helmet, his hands trembling. It was scuffed and worn, the paint faded, but he could still see his father's initials scratched into the side. TR. He wore this. Daniel whispered. Every ride, Cain said. He was with us for a few years before he became a firefighter. Good man. Best I ever knew. Daniel clutched the helmet to his chest, his vision blurring. Thank you for everything, for showing up that night, for keeping your promise. Cain placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. You keep being the man your father raised you to be. That's all the thanks we need. The bikers mounted their motorcycles one by one, engines roaring back to life. Cain gave Daniel a final nod, then they rolled out, disappearing down the tree-lined campus road in a thunder of sound and memory. Daniel stood there long after they'd gone, helmet in hand, the autumn wind cool against his face. He thought about his father, about promises kept, about the family you're born into and the family that chooses you. And he thought about honor, not as something loud or showy, but as something quiet and steady. The kind of thing you carry with you, even when no one's watching, especially when no one's watching. He pulled out his phone and texted his mother a photo of the helmet. Dad's still with us. Her reply came almost instantly. Always. Daniel slipped the phone into his pocket, adjusted his backpack, and walked back toward the engineering building. He had class in 20 minutes, a future to build, a promise to keep, and for the first time in years, he believed he could. Thank you so much for watching this story to the very end. If it moved you, made you think, or reminded you that dignity and respect matter, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We create stories like this every week because we believe honor, loyalty, and standing up for what's right never go out of style. Leave a comment and let us know what you thought. We read every single one. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and remember, the measure of a person isn't what they have, but what they do when it matters most.